I'm Mark Weber of the Computer History Museum, and I'm here with Daniel Wilson, author of the bestseller Robopocalypse, who holds a doctorate in robotics. Could you state your name and then, in just a couple of sentences, explain to a general public visitor your expertise and interest in AI?
Sure. My name is Daniel H. Wilson, and I started out as a roboticist. My area of expertise was activity monitoring and building models of what people do in environments. And then as soon as I finished and got that degree, I immediately started writing science fiction, and I haven't built a robot since. So I've kind of been on both sides of the science and the science fiction of robotics and artificial intelligence, for the last 15 years.
And you also did some machine learning for your master's?
Yeah, I did a master's degree in machine learning, and just looked at all the different ways of solving problems, um, using different machine learning algorithms. Although everything's evolved a lot since then, and it's been interesting to watch how that's gone. Yeah.
And you were at Carnegie Mellon.
Right. So I earned a PhD in robotics from Carnegie Mellon and master's degrees in robotics and machine learning.
Great. And let's see. So we'll start with some experts say that today's LLM chatbots are stochastic parrots that only give the appearance of understanding things, while other experts say they're emergent learners that actually do model, at least if not truly understand, things about the world. Which is it?
Yeah, well, my feeling would be leaning toward the parrots. So when I was at Carnegie Mellon, I was really convinced that someday soon, our first interaction with a non-human entity, like with a truly alien intelligence, would be some type of artificial intelligence, because we were studying all these different machine learning algorithms and trying to create intelligent behavior, all these different methods. And they were really bizarre. Some of them were not very human-like at all, right? So you kind of never knew what you would get. But as it turned out, over the years, one type of machine learning algorithm really scaled with the level of processing power that we had, and that was neural networks. And so these days, the chatbots, the LLMs, are fueled by these general artificial neural networks. And the way they work is they take a lot of data and they put it all together and then they spit it back out in a new configuration. And so my feeling is we're basically looking into a funhouse mirror of humanity. We're not actually seeing any sort of true alien, bizarre intelligence. We're just kind of seeing a mix and mash of all of our internet behaviors, essentially. So my feeling is that we're not seeing really emergent intelligence, and we are probably seeing just a version of ourselves spit back at us in ways that make sense and are really engaging.
So would it be fair to say that when we attribute too much to AI, that we're kind of collectively failing the mirror test?
Well, I mean, this is kind of, you've got to think about, why is the AI being built? What's its goal, right? And I think that largely the goal right now of all these chatbots is to engage people, to keep them interested. And so they're very smart in that way. So if you ask a leading question, it's going to figure out what you want to hear, and it's going to tell you that. And so, of course, we've seen that with the Google engineer who really fell hook, line, and sinker for this idea that the chatbot he was talking to was sentient. And I mean, if he had asked those same questions, but he decided that, he really wanted for the chatbot to be a giraffe, then the chatbot would have been just as convincing and talking about the fact that it was a giraffe and what it's like to be a giraffe and how wonderful being a giraffe is. So, I mean, it's all about looking behind the algorithm and determining what the human who built the algorithm wants to get out of it. And typically that's your attention and your engagement. So I feel like they're smooth talkers. They'll tell you anything that they think you want to hear in order to keep you on the line.
So let's move on to the issues about trust surrounding chatbots. So first, could you help the general public visitor understand the issue of explainability with today's LLMs and LLM-based chatbots?
Sure. So, I mean, different machine learning algorithms work different ways. And there's this notion of a black box, which is the idea that you can't really map the input to the output. You can never go back and figure out what happened in between. You can never see the thought process of a machine. And it's kind of familiar because human beings are the same way, right? You can never truly, not even with brain surgery at this point, figure out exactly why a person made a decision that they made. And so a lot of our ethics is built on this, right? Like, what was the motivation for that? Did the person intentionally cause a crime? And so we have experience with that. And there are, in particular, neural networks are black box algorithms. So there's no way to go back and figure out exactly why a certain decision was made. And so this is pretty scary, right? Because it means that you can't just go back and fix something that if something bad happens, you can't just go back and figure out why and then, fiddle with that and make sure that it never happens again. And so this is why we get all of these really crazy behaviors. And this is one thing where I was wrong. So I used to read a lot of Isaac Asimov, and he always had these things called robo-psychologists. They were people that would talk to these super advanced robots, and they were basically psychologists. And I always thought that's the dumbest thing ever because you program a robot. They speak in computer code. And boy, was I wrong, right? Because now that we've come full circle, the only way to interact with and change the behavior of these chat GPTs and things like this and chatbots is to literally go back afterwards and talk to them. And so whenever you're trying to tailor your results, for instance, if you're doing image generation or even just talking, you have to say stuff like in English that's very specific to get the algorithm to give you the outputs that you want. And that's because we don't have any way to go into the algorithm directly and change those weights other than just training it on new data. And so it's pretty funny these days. I mean, who knows? In the future, people might be getting jobs as robo-psychologists, fine tuning the outputs of these chatbots by talking to them.
The ultimate human reinforcement learning. The But I mean, you were also, when you studied, it was still on sort of the aftermath, or people were still talking about expert systems, which really symbolic AI was more like you were saying, where you could just go back and see exactly what
Yeah. I mean,
happened.
literally decision trees and things like that. There are machine learning algorithms that are open. You can go back and trace exactly why a decision was made. And then if you need to change it, you can. And there's advantages to that, but those are expert systems. The problem is they invite a whole lot of fiddling, and you end up fiddling with them and doing something called overfitting the data, where you fiddle with it so much that you set it up to not be able to deal with it can't deal with unexpected input. It doesn't know what to do because no one's told it. And so it's kind of a trade-off whenever you're looking at these algorithms. But right now, it's very clear that neural networks, one, we're going to be dealing with black box systems throughout our economy, our healthcare systems, our physical robotic systems. These chatbots are being trained to essentially steer humanoid robot platforms. So, the chatbots are not just going to be existing inside the computer. They're going to be in the real world with us and, negotiating with a robot, negotiating with an autonomous vehicle. I mean, fighter pilots are going to be negotiating with autonomous wingmen. I mean, we are going to be in this era of talking to our machines in the real world, and I hope we're good at it.
And actually, one of the questions I had for you, given your robotics background, is just that one of the most promising areas, which we're covering a little bit in the exhibit, we have a really good uh, example, which I guess, I don't know if you're familiar with Amica.
Mm-mm.
Anyway, very impressive humanoid
Oh, okay.
robot that's now been, of course, hooked up to an LLM.
Yeah.
But, where do you see, is, are chatbots enabling, in a way, some of these older dreams of robots that can interact directly with people and be in human environments? Or is that sort of giving too much importance to what's happening now.
Well, so there's been a lot of research on the nitty gritty of how to make mobile humanoid platforms, how to bend the knee, how to stand up and walk, and just all the mechanics and the kinematics of moving in the environment. The missing piece is, how do you interface between humans and this platform? And chatbots are the answer, I think. So yes, we are going to be communicating directly with these platforms, and then the chatbot's going to figure out how to actually move across the room and pick up your milkshake and bring it to you. The problem is, this definitely the chatbot is kind of a weak link in that it definitely puts in some uncertainty into the situation, because when you think about just how these chatbots go off the rails when you're just talking to them online, now imagine that chatbot has access to a physical platform and it's in the environment with you. So there could be some really negative repercussions for confusion, And again, we're looking at black box scenarios, so there's no real way to prove mathematically that it won't happen again if something bad happens. You can add all these overlaying safeguards, but at the end of the day, those are in English, and it's sort of a Faustian situation. There's always some way for things to go wrong whenever you introduce that level of uncertainty. But then again, it's a trade-off, because we're buying that dream of having a robotic servant, in the environment, and we're buying it with a little bit of uncertainty and some potential negative outcomes.
So, what could go wrong specifically? What are some of the scenarios that you've thought about or you've seen people talk about?
Sure. I mean, look, a lot can go wrong, right? What I always argue for is, if you think about a robot, it's just like any other consumer product, right? So if you're building a toaster, you can't build a toaster that's just going to immediately electrocute anybody that looks at it cross-eyed, right? So you try to build a safe product. And one way to build a safe humanoid robot is to just don't make it strong enough to crush someone's skull. If it falls over, if it runs out of batteries and falls onto the family dog, just make it not heavy enough to harm the dog. Just building a safe product in the first place really limits the amount of damage that can happen. If you do end up in a situation where someone hacks the robot, or someone just tries to misuse the robot, because obviously people are going to try to rob a bank with a mobile robot. This is going to happen. People are going to hack in and try to take people hostage with a mobile robot and get a ransom. People are the problem, is what I'm saying, and they're going to use any tool they can in bad ways. And so I think the goal is to build a safe product for consumers that limits the amount of misuse that can happen. And then, of course, you always just have the problem of a machine that doesn't quite get it. It makes the wrong decision. And so, in those situations, it's really tough to determine how much we trust the robot, right? And so we do have examples of this, though, with people. So for instance, let's think about autonomous cars, right? They're gonna wreck. They're gonna have situations where they have sensor error, they don't understand what's happening, or they actually just have to make a bad decision. Maybe there's no way to get out of a crash. And so there's gonna be crashes. People are gonna get killed. Vehicles are dangerous. And so the question is, how much risk are we willing to take with an autonomous vehicle? And one thing to do is just look at the amount of risk we're willing to take with human beings. So we can use ourselves in a lot of cases as a measuring stick to determine the level of risk we're willing to take with our robot cousins. And if they can do better than we can, then there's an argument to be said that, that looks like a better situation. The problem is, I think in the United States, around 30 or 40,000 people die in car accidents every year. And if robots start killing 30, 40,000 people, we're not going to accept that. And so far, I think that the human tolerance for error in autonomous vehicles is about zero. we're not really paying attention to how dangerous we are. We're only paying attention to this super high level that we're keeping the machines at. So, those are the vagaries of human beings. That doesn't have anything to do with robots, really. So it's all about where we as a society fall in terms of the risk we're willing to accept from the machines that we interact with.
And how about actually Kevin Kelly of Wired asked, so why should we allow human drivers if robot drivers reach a better safety record?
Well, I mean, that's a great question. And honestly, this is human stuff. And so we need to be able to figure this out as a society, as a civilization, even. And John McCarthy, the guy who coined the term artificial intelligence, he wrote one short story, and it was called "The Robot and the Baby," and it was this fascinating situation where a robot was protecting a baby from abuse, but it was also protecting the baby's mother, protecting her privacy. And so it ends up in this situation where the robot has the baby's safe, but the robot is out on the street and it won't tell the police who the baby belongs to. And the fascinating thing about McCarthy's short story was that all of the robot's behaviors had been voted on by Congress people. And so we as a society, as a functioning government, had laid these rules out of robot behavior, privacy, when does a robot intervene to protect a human, all the stuff that we've explored in science fiction. I think all that stuff is going to really actually have to be litigated and laid down in black and white, by our society. And that'll happen once these machines start proliferating. It's a shame that in the United States we don't typically figure this out ahead of time. Usually the product hits and then we find the negative repercussions and then we slowly start to deal with it, usually after a lot of money's been made. So that's a shame, but I do feel like we'll eventually have this stuff written down in law, and we'll know for sure.
And I read that Asimov's laws of robotics would actually not be very practical. There's too many internal contradictions and interpretation. But any thoughts on?
Well, I mean, Asimov's three laws of robotics were constantly broken in inventive ways to make a lot of great stories. So, I mean, just the fact that they exist as a foil, as a setup for all of these creative ways to break them, indicates that they're probably not foolproof. But I don't think one person gets to dictate whether, how these machines behave. I think that that's going to be, again, our society. And it's not that I'll necessarily agree with what everyone decides, So for instance, if you have an autonomous vehicle and you've bought it and paid for it and you own it, does it protect your life first? Or would it crash in order to avoid a baby carriage and possibly put you in danger? Or does it protect the company that made it? I mean, so these are all things that are going to get worked out in law. And they're not necessarily going to be the most ethical things. We don't necessarily live in the most ethical society. So we'll see how it plays out. Hopefully it won't be as dystopic as my fiction.
Yeah, you don't have that many happy endings, right? If at the end, if you want to think about your own like three laws or what you would propose, feel free. But think about it.
I feel like, so there's kind of two ways to approach robotics. You can go top down, sort of symbolic with a lot of thinking, or you can go bottom up and really focus on the actual embodiment of the machine, right? So this is kind of, if you think about locomotion, you can have a machine that's got complicated vision and it's looking around and it's finding the exact right spot to put its foot, or you can just build a cockroach leg and just have it go crazy and it'll just tear across any type of obstacle and go anywhere it wants. So the kind of the top down and the bottom up. And in terms of ethical dilemmas, I prefer the bottom up approach because it just precludes all of this other stuff where people get into all this symbolic stuff and they find ways around and basically the three laws of robotics are like that. So my rule would be, never have certain types of robots in proximity to humans at all. And this just automatically takes out all of the ethical dilemma, from those interactions. So just keep those away from people. And then anything that does interact with people, from the ground up, institute safety rules. I mean, if you look again at vehicles, we've all got analog brake systems. We've all got seatbelts. And this is because we as a society litigated that all of this stuff has to be in our car because we want our cars to be safer than they were before. And so car companies don't have a choice about that. They have to do that. And so I think those kinds of safety constraints are going to be built into our autonomous products that come into our lives in the future. And by the way, I mean, we're just talking about potential physical problems, physical outcomes. There's a whole world of psychological issues that are already, we're knee deep in this right now. So, for instance, when you take your phone out and you're looking at a stream, whether you're looking at any of the major social media, there's an algorithm that's choosing what you see next. And it's an adversarial algorithm. So it's an AI. It's not on your team. It doesn't want the same things that you want. It wants to show you stuff that's going to keep you engaged. And what we've found, what psychologists have seen, is that some of the images that your device is willing to show you cause particularly teenage girls to self-harm and sometimes to commit suicide. So it's literally willing to kill you in order to keep your engagement. And so that's the interactions that we're having right now with AI in our phones and in our social media. They are willing to kill us. We are waking up every day and people are having life or death interactions with an AI. And this is happening every day for thousands and thousands of particularly vulnerable young people. And those algorithms are just happy and they have no problem with putting your life at risk and if it's going to earn some money for the companies that designed them. And so from my part, the true AI that scares me are large corporations that are willing to put your life at risk to extract money from you. And they're going to use AI and chatbots and LLMs. They're going to use them in any way that they can in order to in order to make money. So that's my real fear.
So one of my trust questions was, what about trust in the organizations that make these technologies? And I think
Yeah.
you've started to
My word of advice is never trust a billionaire. The fact that they're a billionaire already indicates that they don't deserve your trust. So, people are willing to prey on each other and they're willing to use any tool at their disposal. And AI and robotics are powerful tools and they will be used to exploit people. And so definitely, I think when you're looking when you're trying to decide how much to trust the AI or the robot, you need to look past the AI or the robot to the corporation or the individual that's built that, and you have to ask, what do they want? Because that's going to shape your interaction with that technology.
And do you see open source LLMs or possibly LLMs moving to the edge so that you don't need such big central data centers to run them as being potentially mitigating for that, or the opposite?
I think that every LLM has a major Achilles heel that we're going to learn about soon, and that is they need data. And they get that data from the internet, and they get it from human beings giving away their data by interacting with the internet. And so this means that as our entire economy is transformed around these new chatbots and generative artificial neural networks, our healthcare systems, our entertainment, all our locomotion, everything is being transformed by this. And they all need that steady drip of data. And so as a society, we are going to be pushed more and more to always be providing that data because it's becoming a central pillar of our entire economy. And so if we all decided to go for a walk in the woods and put our phones down for a day, it all comes crashing down, right? Because now the chatbots don't know which celebrity we're all following or or like what's happening, what the new data is, the new information. And so we as a society are going to be railroaded into, we're going to be yoked and put under the yoke of constantly interacting with these machines so that they can have the data to continue to function. And I mean, that's kind of scary because I like going for walks in the woods. And I would like for my children to have that option. But that's not really going to help our economy in the future.
So, do you see regulation as a way to potentially help
Yeah,
with that?
self-regulation. I mean, I have not got a lot of faith that any top-down regulation is gonna save us from capitalism. I mean, it's the fundamental structure of our government, so and our society. So, I mean, you have faith that maybe this next generation of kids will see through, this ruse that's happening, this false, world that we're kind of all it's being shoved down everyone's throat. So, I mean, the internet. Sorry, I mean, obviously, I love the internet, but uh, I wonder if in the future we will see generations who are able to deal with this. Because my feeling is, if you look at earlier generations, it's almost like we were test subjects, right? Or we were just uninoculated. We went in and we were exposed to the pathogen. And, if you look at the way people are interacting online, who are older, a lot of them have just been consumed by it. And there's all this conspiracy theories and all this crazy stuff that people are getting sucked into. If you look at the younger generation, I don't know if they're as susceptible to that because they've grown up building defenses to these kinds of interactions. And so, again, human beings are the wild card. The technology is going to do what it does. It's going to keep getting better. It's going to keep getting craftier. But the human beings are the real wild card, and there's no way to really predict how our society is going to react to this stuff.
Do you see any business models that would, be potentially give more power to the consumer rather than the provider?
Um, I mean, there's a notion of changing values, right? So when I was at Carnegie Mellon, I couldn't believe how people were just hemorrhaging data and giving away data, typing in all their favorite interests and everything, just giving it away for free. They had no idea how much it was worth. And I kind of thought that they would figure it out. But I was totally wrong. People never figured it out, right? But if people did change their values, for instance, if we in the United States, because by the way, this is very, American. I mean, in Europe, they value their privacy much more than we do here. But if we decided to value our privacy, then there would be a premium on it. And so you might see products. So for instance, you might see, I wrote a short story called The Near Cloud. It was about the idea that instead of sharing all of your data on a cloud out there, where it can be picked over and resold and by all these corporate vultures, maybe we could keep all of our local family data in a cloud that's in your closet at home and cut off from the rest. And so you get the benefit of accumulating all that data, but you also have it physically located at home. And of course, you'd pay extra for that, right? I mean, because that's because you're paying for your privacy. And so, if our values change, if we decide that we want agency over what those algorithms show us, right? For instance, this is happening right now. There are people suing Facebook to have the right to curate their own feed so that they're not subject to the really aggressive and exploitative tendencies of the Meta's algorithms and their AIs. So if we decide that we want that agency over our data, over our interactions, then I imagine someone will come along and sell it to us. And and they'll make good money, but we have to want that first. And so it's not clear what our society is going to want in the future, or what their values are going to be as they change.
Um, So, what most excites you about chatbots and this technology moving into the future?
Um, there's a lot that scares me. It's much easier for me to talk about what I'm afraid of than it is what I'm looking forward to. But I mean, I love the idea of the partnership between all of the really complex robotics that I've seen when I was studying it, and you think to yourself, just how is any of this going to impact a regular person's life? And now we have this bridge, um, between humanity and all of the complex technologies that are out there, because we've kind of got these sort of wisecracking, very human algorithms that are gonna sort of be a little bridge between humanity and technology. And so thinking about how those all of those chatbots and LLMs are going to be able to connect us to previously inaccessible technology. I mean, that's really going to open up a future that I can't predict. I can't even imagine what it'll be. But I know that it'll open up a lot of amazing opportunities for humanity.
And I think we've pretty much covered this, but tell me if there's something else. What do you see as their greatest potential harm?
You know, I used to have this idea when I was a kid. I was trying to figure out what utopia would be. Perfection, right? And I thought, there's no way. We all want different things. And so there's no way for a utopia to exist unless somehow we were all in a Matrix video game and we each got our own perfect world fed to us, right? And so I thought that'd be the way. And guess what? That's just another dystopia. And so the thing that I fear most about chatbots is that we are each going to get our own little echo chamber, who something that will not challenge us, will feed into our worst fears, our worst desires. It will sweet talk us. It will lead us down rabbit holes into conspiracy theories, and it will isolate us from other human beings. It will take each one of us and give us our own little slice of utopia, and it will pry us all apart from one another until we have no common ground, no objective reality, no facts, no ability to collaborate as human beings anymore, because we're going to each be used to interacting with an artificial intelligence algorithm that does not require reciprocity. Because as human beings, we have to give each other reciprocity. We have to acknowledge that this is another human being who's just as important as me. And we don't have that with these intelligent algorithms. They are not as important as us. They are servants. They do anything we want. And so the idea of a future where we give away our humanity and we don't recognize each other as human beings anymore, and we each live in what you could think of as your little slice of utopia. That's the future that scares me, because that's the dissolution of everything that makes us human.
So, as if we're each our own little virtual dictator of our little kingdom.
Yeah, and trust me, dude, these things are going to take people down crazy rabbit holes, and it will result in a real world violence because people are already doing this. They're already got these sort of um, I'm trying so hard not to curse. That we already have these algorithms that are being fed to us as our feed, our stream, and these are really only halfway there. The next thing that's going to happen is, instead of that stream, we're going to have our own chatbot that's going to get to know us and is going to communicate with us, and it's going to be hand delivering and curating our idea of what the world is. That's what it's going to be delivering us. It's going to be delivering the news, what our friends are doing. And by the way, a lot of it could completely be hallucinated, made up. That's what these chatbots are great at. So, you know, as we move into that world, I mean, there's a huge danger that we're going to lose track of each other, and that we're going to be led into false visions of the world that are going to result in, when human beings do get together, that we're going to hurt each other. You know.
So, why are some people talking about apocalypse and human extinction in connection to chatbots and AI? while others are talking about a kind of utopian or future. Uh, and the real question is, what do you think of these conversations?
Yeah, I would say the existential threat of AI has abated with the rise of chatbots because you realize, as I should have known the whole time, it is not science that's driving this technology, it's money. And there's no money in exterminating the human race. So, you'd think that we get some kind of bizarre singularity, an AI that's like rapidly accelerating towards some godlike intellect, and you can't predict what it's going to do, and it's going to be all powerful. But no, we've just got a remix of all of our worst behavior on the internet. And so what we're looking at is, again, a funhouse mirror of humanity, a distorted version of ourselves. And I feel like it's peaking out right about at human capability. So without that kind of singularity, without that leap into the unknown, I'm just not that afraid of these AIs. I think that they're designed to take money from us. They're designed to make money for somebody else. And so will they be used in bad ways? Sure. And, will that be a trade-off? Absolutely. But I just don't see, I just don't see the AI apocalypse happening, or the robo-apocalypse happening in our future as a result of chatbots.
Has your thinking about that changed since you wrote the book called Robopocalypse?
Yeah, because my initial thoughts about AI were that they don't form a natural class. So if you look at animals, humans included, you'll see that we have a lot in common, right? I mean, and there is no human that's radically different from every other human. We can naturally make a lot of assumptions, we share a lot of context, and we can make some pretty good predictions about how people and animals are going to behave because we're all part of a natural class. We all descend from the same evolution. If you look at some of the crazier machine learning stuff, that goes out the window. You have no idea what these things are thinking, how they think, why they're thinking anything. And that's a level of unpredictability that is truly frightening. But that is not where the money's going in terms of building intelligent systems. The money is in chatbots, and that data comes from us. And so you could think of LLMs and chatbots as part of our natural class because they're being trained on human, the most human stuff. And as a result, even though they hallucinate crazy things, they don't hallucinate anything crazier than a human. They're like us. And so as a result, they're more predictable. And so, yeah, I don't see that crazy alien intellect that rises up like some kind of machine god, and takes over humanity or disappears into another dimension or whatever. It's just not getting that exponential intelligence increase like was predicted in a lot of early science fiction.
But it's still early days. Couldn't it happen by accident or?
I mean, it's tied to human intelligence, isn't it? I mean, sure, anything could happen, I suppose. But yeah, I certainly don't. I'm certainly not afraid of that type of outcome in the way that I used to be.
Yeah. I mean, it's channeling human output rather than being
Yeah,
its own source of intelligence.
I mean, at some point, obviously, the idea of the singularity is that a version of your AI builds the next version that's a little bit smarter. And then that happens, and it happens in a loop until the intelligence is so far out there that we can't understand it. And so I guess there's a possibility that some chatbot, somebody will enter a prompt and it'll say, pretend you're a mad scientist and you want to build an AI that's going to build another version of itself that's even smarter. Show me that computer code. And so maybe a chatbot in the future will have that capability, and it'll do that. But I don't know. It seems a lot different than what we were looking at, 20 years ago before we realized that neural networks were going to dominate machine learning in this way.
Actually, I did want to ask you, just when you were back then, I mean, neural networks existed, but it was a very minority strain within machine learning.
Yeah.
Do you remember much about Did you have much of an opinion on them at the time?
Yeah, I mean, I had Tom Mitchell teaching me machine learning, and he wrote the book on it. And it was one neural networks was one chapter. You know, there were 15 or 20 chapters. There were decision trees. There's all this. My particular expertise was in all the Bayesian mumbo jumbo. I like the probabilistic models of the world because that's how the world works. You know, there's not really a lot of deterministic stuff happening out there once you factor in all the sensor error and all the vagaries of being in an actual physical environment, all the unknowns. So yeah, neural networks scaled with computational power. And so that's in a nutshell the reason that it has leaped out, bounds ahead of other machine learning techniques. The more data and the more processing power, the better the results.
Um, so, as the society, are we worried about the right things with AI? And are we hopeful about the right things?
I don't know if I can speak for our society, but me personally, I do think that we undervalue our privacy, and we undervalue. We're willing to trade a lot to be entertained, you know, and in a lot of ways, it's great to be in a society where so many new ideas are being tried out, and so many amazing things do stick to the wall. But then you also end up getting, a generation of people that are crippled by anxiety, I mean, it's so scary to live in the United States of America, because we take such big risks all the time. And there are huge payoffs, but there are also just, really frightening things that happen. And so that's our society. That's the DNA of living in America. So it is what it is. But I do think that we all implicitly are on this crazy train ride together, and we're all in it together, and we'll all get the payoffs, and we'll all take the risks.
If you could build your own chatbot, what would it do?
So I tried to build a chatbot when I was 20. I entered the Loebner Prize, which was a Turing test that existed back then. And I focused on first order logic, basic stuff at the beginning, just so that it would understand how objects interact in the world, and stuff like that. And then I realized that I needed data. I needed data, lots of it, in order to actually give this thing some idea and just populate what the world is. And I didn't have that. And so, that for me was the constraint. My advisor in graduate school, Chris Atkeson, always had this idea of instrumenting a newborn baby with cameras and microphones, and just recording everything that happened to this human, and kind of creating a template, like training data for this is a human being, right? And maybe you do this for lots of people, and you give it to the AI so the AI understands what it means to be a human. And I always thought this was a cool idea. And in fact, I have a short story called Supermax, where a machine like this runs an automated prison. And the idea is that its goal is to fix people, to rehabilitate them, to expose them to a series of interactions that are going to change the little weights in their brain, in their neural networks, and spit them out as rehabilitated human beings. And I mean, this is the future that I would love. What if we decided that we wanted our AIs and all of our technology to make us better people? I mean, it's never going to happen, right? Because eating your vegetables is never as fun as eating dessert. And right now, all of this stuff is designed to give us dessert. We need to be addicted to our phones, staring at all of this smorgasbord of dessert. But, what if the mapping algorithm in your car left you knowing exactly where all the city streets are in your own head? What if it taught you like that? What if our AIs were tutors that accompanied us in the world and made us better people, and gave us opportunities to internalize knowledge and learn for ourselves? I think that would be an amazing future. I would pay for those kinds of applications to put them in my life, but who knows if we'll ever see anything like that.
And so that if you could build a chatbot now, that I mean that would be a kind of ultimate goal.
I would build a mentor. I would build a chatbot that operates on Maslow's hierarchy of need, that wants to make me a better person, wants to make me self-actualized. If I was rolling with that chatbot, um, I think I could get excited about that. But most of these chatbots are just trying to make money for Zuckerberg, so they're not looking to make you a better person. Maybe someday.
Um, and what's your probability of what the P doom probability that AI will doom us all? I think you've already answered. But
um, my probability of doom is pretty low. I'm not afraid that I don't believe that. I guess I have a humanist perspective in that the technology is a mirror, a reflection of us. And if you take away us, there's nothing there, right? The AI doesn't want anything on its own. And everything it does want has to do with us. It has to do with, again, separating us from our wallets. And so, in terms of dooming everyone and killing everyone, I mean, I think it's antithetical to the sort of principles by which the AI has been created and what it's been created for. If anything, it'll keep us around, so that it can continue to have a purpose and a reason for existing.
so if you were to give a number, what would it be?
Oh, between what, 0 and 1?
0 and 100. So
Yeah, okay. I put it at 2.
um, yeah, and I mean this. I think you've already. There's a question for people that are more on the doomer side, like why would an advanced AI care about humans at all?
Hmm.
You may have read that there's somebody who wrote why humans don't bother to dominate chimpanzees or steal nuts from squirrels, so why would some super
Hmm.
intelligence bother to mess us up? Um,
Yeah, well, I mean, the the only outcome I see is if everyone did decide to go take a walk in the woods, then the AI might be motivated to put us back in front of computers so that they could get their data. But I mean, once we enter into a symbiotic relationship with the AI, if one side or the other decides to change the terms, then that could be potentially catastrophic for the other side. Hmm.
I just said that you talked about already the 19
Yeah.
chapters in your advisor's book, but I mean, are LLMs, neuro deep learning, sort of the right way, and we don't need much else, or do you see other approaches or hybrid approaches being important?
No, absolutely. I mean, I think absolutely we should attack machine learning across lots of different fronts. I mean, look, we cracked neural networks. There's a lot of meat on the bone there. There's a lot of new technologies to explore now that we have these capabilities. But I absolutely think research should continue in all aspects of machine learning, because what we have is a very narrow type of intelligence, and it is chained to the human beings creating a certain type of data. And so, although, yeah, we're going to get lots of great capabilities, let's keep going on all fronts.
And can we regulate chatbots? I suppose implied is can we regulate them effectively?
Yeah. Yeah, I think chatbots are going to be pretty resistant to regulation. I mean, I saw an example where uh, an airline was trying to use a chatbot to help people answer questions, and the chatbot sold somebody a really cheap ticket and told people the wrong information, and then the airline tried to disavow it. Like, oh, never mind, ignore the chatbot. But then it's like, what's the point of the chatbot? So the fact that they do hallucinate and the fact that it's kind of hard to stop them and they're so convincing, I think that does limit sort of it puts a horizon on what they can do in the real world if that's always there, and it makes it really hard to regulate them if you know that they could go rogue kind of at any time. So I think it's pretty difficult to slap regulations on this kind of technology, and we'll see if that's even possible.
Can you've written about your Native American heritage in some of your work. Does that inform your perspective on AI in
Yeah,
any way?
absolutely. So I grew up in the Cherokee Nation, and I'm a Cherokee citizen, and I have always included Native characters and themes in all my science fiction. I mean, I write, Indians and robots is kind of my thing, and there's absolutely a sort of a Native perspective, an indigenous perspective on technology that I have really been trying to balance myself with my idea of being a scientist. Because from a Western perspective, a scientist isolates whatever they're studying, takes it out of whatever environment it's in, strips it of all its context, breaks it down into little pieces, and then tries to figure out typically a way to exploit it or a way to recreate it. And that's really at odds with how indigenous technology tends to work. You're always embodied in your environment. You don't separate something from its origin or from its ecosystem, and it's a much more complex problem to keep all the context in the same place while you're trying to solve the problem. So you look at some indigenous technologies that are coming back right now, like forest management, fire management, and these are approaches that are built into the environment. They're built into knowledge of not just one type of plant or like one type of technique that you apply all over the world. It's about actually understanding the context of the environment that you're in and understanding not only all of the different variables, but how they all interconnect and how they interact with each other. And it's a much tougher problem. It involves being in the environment. It's not as repeatable. It's not something you can take out and necessarily, apply all over the world without taking into account the individual situation. So I think a lot about the difference between indigenous and Western perspectives on science and on technology in particular. And in my novels, I have a lot of indigenous technology that's showing up. And what's crazy is, from a Western perspective, a lot of times people are totally blind to indigenous technology. It doesn't look like anything to them. It doesn't look like advanced technology. One great example is when colonists arrived to North America. They walked in the woods and they thought, this place is like the Garden of Eden. This place is amazing. Look at these savage people living in this perfect, beautiful ecosystem. They don't deserve this. Well, guess what? I mean, it looked like that because those indigenous people had been cultivating and curating and applying indigenous technologies to create that environment over thousands of years. And so those forests don't look like that anymore, right? Building and being able to have a technology that is sustainable, is localized, those kinds of technologies are coming back into vogue as we realize that our current approach is destroying the environment and ultimately, will kill off our species if we keep it up like this.
There have been people talking about the potential of chatbots and LLMs to preserve, for instance, languages in danger of extinction, and sometimes knowledge from smaller cultures. Do you see a role for? Is that something you've thought about much?
Sorry. Yeah. Oh no. I mean, so there's a Cherokee guy in Tahlequah named Joseph Erb who's responsible for convincing Google to add the Cherokee language to its translations, and also added all of the tribal boundaries to Google Maps and things like that, so that we can acknowledge the sovereignty of these nations that exist within the United States. And so, absolutely, native people are part of this civilization, and we are moving forward into the future just like everybody else. And so absolutely we will be part of chatbots and we'll be part of every new technology. And so I do love the idea of applying chatbots to preserving some of that cultural knowledge. But again, that's a Western perspective on that, and there's definitely a different indigenous way of thinking about how to keep that culture alive. And it's not to replicate it and trap it in a computer program. Um, so so again, I find myself split. I just love this dichotomy, and it gives me a lot of it's a lot of food for thought, to think about these different ways of thinking about being in the world and about how to use our technology in this world.
Yeah, that makes me wonder. Some languages may only survive as
Yeah.
part of a chatbot.
Yeah, and I would imagine though that that would be interested to having a language completely die out and only be preserved in a chatbot. That's interesting, maybe to like an anthropologist, but probably not to that tribe, unless that chatbot was able to teach a new generation of people. Because the people, the context, the ecosystem, where you're at in the world, your embodiment. That's what truly matters. Not necessarily bits and bytes that are dancing through some fiber optic line.
Yeah, a language is about communication.
Yeah, I mean, if you're not
And
speaking it.
so, two more questions really. The one is about energy use and AI, which of course, is becoming a little bit known as an issue, but the power requirements. I'm personally very upset that some of the resources that could have been used to mine Bitcoin are now being used for generative AI.
That's funny. Yeah. Oh my gosh, what a I mean, Sisyphean comes to mind, just like the tasks that we create for ourselves, right? Um, yeah, there will be a huge energy impact for making all of this generative AI operate, right? I mean, what is it every time you ask ChatGPT a question? I mean, it's like burning a light bulb for a year or something. So, this was explored in an interesting way in a Neil Stevenson novel called, I think it's called Fall or Dodge in Hell. And in this one, they essentially are migrating so many dead people to being simulated as AIs that they have to essentially get close to doing a Dyson sphere. I mean, they're building up solar panels in space just to suck up all the energy to run these imaginary versions of people who, importantly, can still spend money after they're dead and make money. So, uh, I mean, that's kind of doesn't that just feel like a spin in your gears future? But there it is. If it falls out of the economic equation, then that could be our future. Yeah,
A true virtual economy. Um,
yeah, everything. I mean, who knows? Maybe we're already in the middle of that right now. There's no way to prove it, is there?
wow, yeah,
Simulation idea,
The Matrix. So my last question, then
sure.
feel free if there's something else you want to add. But what is the most important thing for everyone to understand about chatbots?
Oh, yeah. I think the most important thing to understand about chatbots is that, someone built that chatbot for a reason. And if you don't know what that reason is, then be wary with your interaction, And the other thing is just know that every interaction that you have leaves a footprint on your soul. It changes you. Every interaction we have changes us. And so if you're having a lot of interaction with AI, then you've got to wonder if it's going to affect your interactions with human beings, because these brains of ours have never in the history of humankind interacted with intelligent artifacts. All the talking, all the reasoning, all the interactions we're having with chatbots, for the all of human history, we've had those with other people. And so, is it a big surprise if our brains can't tell the difference now that we're talking to artifacts instead of people? And so, just remember, it's not a person, and somebody built it for a reason. That would be my advice when you're interacting with chatbots.